Oi, pessoal, tudo bem? This is Studying Portuguese with Gustavo, where you're going to learn vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation tips for the Portuguese language, and of course, a little bit about Brazilian culture to help you speak Portuguese faster than you think. My name is Gustavo, and today's topic is about supermarket. Let's go. So, guys, first of all, I want to tell you what is this video about. So, basically, every time that we go to supermarket, of course, when you go in a foreigner country, for example, if you guys come to Brazil and they try to buy some things, try to buy some groceries, of course, that most of the groceries gonna look similar of the groceries in the US or in the UK or in Europe or other countries, right? And then, of course, like the name you can actually, for example, you have your cell phone, you can look it up, the name. You won't have any problem doing that. But the thing is, the most difficult part is when you go to the cashier and then you have that small conversation with the cashier, you know? So that is one of my students, they always tell me they don't know what to say, or mainly they don't understand what the cashier as thing, you know? So that's why I made this video to tell you the most used questions and what you can answer and what you can understand. And then it's very interesting because uh, speaking of that, I have a really funny story about my wife. My wife, she is from the US, but she has lived in Brazil for 2 years. And then I remember sometimes she would go to the supermarket by herself, you know, especially because when I was working, I didn't have time to go with her. She would need to go by herself. And then I remember she was learning Portuguese at that time. And then, you know, I used to live in a street and they really like in the corner there was a supermarket over there and they we would go to that same supermarket like very often, so I kind of memorized what they would ask all the time to me or to any other people. So she asked me, okay, Gustavo, so what do usually they ask, you know? So I said, okay, next time we're gonna go there. So this is the thing, they're gonna ask first. So in Brazil, later I'm gonna tell you guys, but basically there is an option that we have a number, something like the social security number. And in Portuguese, it's actually the letters CPF. In Portuguese, we say CPF. So this is more or less like our social security number. So if you want, whenever you buy something, you can tell them, can you put my number there? Because the government gives this incentive to clients, to customers actually put their social security number, they CPF, because they later they can get some part of that tax they pay back, you know. So that's one of the incentives, and then it's a good way to track down business expenses, business sales, you know. So that's why it became very popular in Brazil. To whenever you buy something, especially like on restaurants or supermarket, they ask you, hey, would you like to put your social security number? Probably they're gonna ask, do you want to put this, you know? So I taught her the sentence, you know. Would you like to put your social security number? I taught her the exact sentence. I taught her, okay, later they're gonna ask, do you have our loyalty program? They're gonna ask that, and that's it, you know. Later you're gonna can have like a small chat with the cashier, like ask to practice your Portuguese, ask about how is the weather today and stuff like that, right? But mainly they will ask those two questions. Okay, so my wife went there and later when she came back, she told me, Gustavo, like they didn't say anything that you taught me. I was like, no, what did they say? They say, do you have any bags? So, but she told me in Portuguese. So I was like, oh no, yes, right? Like, so it was funny because I told her everything that I thought they would ask, but they ended up asking, do you want any bags? Because this is another thing from Brazil. Actually, right now, because of the environment, right? They are trying to avoid to give for free the plastic bags. So actually, if you want like a plastic bag, you needed to pay for it, you know? It's really cheap. It's very cheap. It's something like maybe 2 cents or 3 cents, whatever, but for each bag, you know. So, but usually they do this just to motivate you or motivate the population to actually buy those reusable bags, you know, so you don't need to have a lot of waste in those plastic bags. So that's another thing they ask. So what I want to tell you guys is depends on the city where you are at, or depends where the culture of the place, they might ask you different questions, you know. So in São Paulo, mainly, they ask about those loyalty programs. They ask you if you want to put your social security number, the Brazilian social security number, and they also ask if you do want any bags. So later I will tell you exactly how to say that in Portuguese and how to answer. All right. Also, one thing is very interesting because when you go like to a supermarket right now, it has become very popular. Self-checkout actually. So actually you can go and then you can scan it by yourself, right? And then later you pay, no problem. But in Brazil, last time that I went there, I didn't see many supermarkets like that. So if you go to Brazil, if you go to a supermarket, it most like you're gonna you need to talk to someone, to a cashier, you know. And here in the US and in Brazil is the same. A lot of times when we talk to the cashier, we have those small talks. So, for example, we say, "Hi, how are you? How is the weather?" Or I like this product. I don't like this product, right? Like usually, like we have those small talks, and I want to emphasize the importance of this small talk because whenever you are, for example, in a foreigner country, in Brazil, for example, you needed to take advantage of this small talk, you know, because when you have this small talk, actually, they are so small, you can kind of pay attention exactly on how people pronounce like certain words, you know. You can kind of pay attention in the expressions, you know. You can say like, oh, okay, yes. So they say like this or they say like that. This is very important. For example, I've lived in China before and I've been living in the US. So I remember when I was in China, they were so curious to know about us, about foreigners, right? So they would ask a lot of questions, and they all the time they would ask, "Where are you from?" But they would ask in different situations, in different like ways. You know, for example, they ask, "Where are you from? Where are you originally from? Or what country are you from?" So basically, I learned 5 different ways of asking where are you from in Chinese only by those small talks, you know. And then in here in the US as well, like I remember the first time that I came into the US, I wanted to practice English, but it's kind of like you think, well, where can I practice English if I don't know nobody, right? So when you go, for example, to a restaurant, when you go to a supermarket, you are kind of obligated to talk to them. So I would take the most I could to talk to them because sometimes I would never see them again, right? So I would not be nervous. I would be a little bit nervous, of course, but I thought, okay, I'll never see this person again. So it's okay. I would try to ask some questions. So this is a really good opportunity to and this is the thing. If they ask you those questions, those, for example, do you wanna in a bag, or do you wanna put your social security number in, or do you have the loyalty program? If you answer correctly, they will understand you speak Portuguese very well, and then you can have a conversation with them. All right. So this is probably if you're watching this video and you're not in Brazil or you were about to go to Brazil, what I suggest is you watch this video to learn about the culture, to learn this vocabulary, but then make sure you come back here before you go to the supermarket just to review. Okay, but and also when I talk about these small talks, you should take advantage not only at the supermarket but everywhere. So this is one of the benefits when you go abroad. So usually people ask me, so Gustavo, can I learn Portuguese and not live in Brazil? Or, for example, can I learn Portuguese and not live in Portugal? Yes, you can. You can, for example, follow a program and learn Portuguese. You don't have any problems. But uh, when you go, you're gonna see that when you go to the country and then you start speaking the language, you're gonna learn some words that you didn't see it during the lesson. Why is that? Because for the teacher, it's kind of hard to preview every single word they will say, every single word they will tell you. So of course, like the like 80%, 70%, you're gonna learn it like in class, but this other 30%, that makes the difference about in your Portuguese level, you know? So whenever you can go to Brazil, go to Portugal, and try to have those small talks. All right. So I'm gonna share my screen with you so I can show you exactly the words you need to speak in have those small talks in a supermarket in Brazil, all right? Especially in São Paulo. So let me share my screen with you. All right, guys. So the first thing that I want to show you guys is this is everywhere, right? Whenever you get to a place, for example, to a restaurant, to the supermarket, you want to greet the person, and then you want to say, "Hi, how are you?" And it's very interesting, but the most common way to do that in a supermarket is to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. This is very common, you know. So, and I think it's a matter of a Brazilian culture because we use this a lot, especially I think in English, you guys use a lot of good morning, like morning, good evening, like whenever you get in a restaurant, right? Or good night when you say bye to people. But I don't hear so much good afternoon, but in Portuguese, it's very common. Way if you go to the supermarket in the afternoon, they will say good afternoon. All right. So they will say good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, good night. So this is also a way to remember how to say that. And I want to you repeat with me those words just to pay attention in the pronunciation. All right. So repeat it here with me. We have bom dia. Yes. Bom dia. Boa tarde. Boa tarde. Yeah, so this is very interesting because the D right here, if you notice, there is like it has a G sound, right? So sometimes when a student hear G, boa tarde, sometimes they already think that is another word, but no, actually it's with D. Boa tarde. Nice. And then we have boa noite. Yes, very good. Boa noite. So usually it's very common to say oi, tudo bem? Or say bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. It's very common. All right. So after that, what they usually ask, what do they usually ask? They ask about the loyalty program. So for example, I remember so close to my house when I used to live in São Paulo, there were two main supermarkets, and then probably you may know this brand or not because they are in São Paulo, but also they are in other cities, in other states as well. But basically, the one that I used to have is called uh, Pão de Açúcar. It's very small right here. I don't know if you guys can see it. Pão de Açúcar. And they would have a loyalty program called Cliente Mais. Yeah, so cliente mais means more like more clients, right? Cliente mais. And then another one that I have, another supermarket that was close to my house was a supermarket called actually this one, Dia. Dia is basically day. So they would say clube. So look, this is actually very similar to in English, right? Exactly. But the pronunciation we say clube. Clube dia. Yes, Clube Dia and Cliente Mais. So, of course, like you don't need to memorize these loyalty programs because they are specific for the loyalty programs in São Paulo and in some other states and city. But what I want to tell you is usually whenever you go to a supermarket in Brazil, the chance to ask you if you are part of a loyalty program is very high. So they ask, they're gonna say, "Good afternoon," and then they say, "Do you have or are you a member?" All the time they're gonna say that. So just pay attention. And then, for example, if you live in a city or if you are spending vacation in a city, because, for example, you have a family member, if you have a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, probably they will, you guys will go back to the same city all the time, like often, right? So you can pay attention, next time that you go to the supermarket over there, you can pay attention, like how do they say, like what loyalty programs they have, all right? And then in my case was Clube Dia or Cliente Mais. So that would be more or less the conversation. There would be boa tarde, Cliente Mais, or there would be boa tarde, Clube Dia. They would only say that, and if you don't know those programs, you can say you're like, I don't know what they're talking about, right? So this is the another thing that I want to tell you guys is your attitude. So for example, usually when we are learning a new language, usually we are so nervous because we are scared that people are gonna talk to us and we won't understand anything, right? And this is actually what is gonna happen right there because you probably won't know the name of the loyalty program. But if you say, for example, just what is this? For example, imagine they say you try to pay attention, you say boa tarde, and the person say boa tarde back to you, and then the cashier say cliente mais, and you say cliente mais. O que é? What is? O que é cliente mais? Or o que é Clube Dia? So they will probably understand. So they will explain, Clube Dia é para ganhar descontos, is to get discounts, promotion. So they will probably explain that to you. So you're like, okay. So next time you go there, you already know. If they say Clube Dia, o cliente mais, you say, não, obrigado. No, thank you. Right? So after that, they will ask this one. So basically, plastic bags in Portuguese, we say sacola, and then we like saying sacolinha. So for those who don't know what this is, you're gonna notice that in Portuguese, every time that you wanna say little something, we say inho or inha at the end of the word. So for example, sacola, sacolinha. Probably you have heard about, for example, we have like soccer players, like we have Ronaldo, Ronaldo, we say Ronaldinho, right? And then in here, for example, maybe my name Gustavo, you can say Gustavinho, right? Or in this case, sacola, sacolinha, all right? So probably they'll ask one of those loyalty programs, for example, cliente mais, and then sacolinha, right? After that, they will ask this CPF. So CPF is our social security number. I think is a little bit different of a social security number because this, even a foreigner can actually have this. So this is a number for the Brazilian IRS verify, like whenever you go, for example, to a university, you need to pay for something. Whenever people give you an invoice, usually they put like your number there, just to track down. And then so that's why if a foreigner lives in Brazil, or it's just like a foreigner, doesn't matter if it lives or not in Brazil, you can actually go and apply for a CPF. It's very simple. My wife, she applied even before she had like a residence visa. She has a tourist visa. She had a tourist visa, and then she could apply. And then later, when she got a residence visa, of course, she kept the same CPF. So usually they nota is a way to say invoice in Portuguese. So they say CPF, they say in Português, CPF na nota, like, do you want that number in your invoice? So not in your, right? So CPF na nota, especially like the CPF na nota, and then you spell, or they make you to type, and say and write down your CPF, all right? Okay, so now let's see dialogue right here. Sorry, before the dialogue, there is the last thing that I forgot. So, okay, so this is the thing. So, I forgot to mention there is this small talk when you talk before the cashier start like scanning all products, right? So they say, for example, uh, they say, "Do you, hi, how are you? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening." They ask you, "Do you have any loyalty programs, or do you want your Brazilian Social Security in your invoice? Yes or no?" Okay, so all the time do you ask this, and then you need to pay attention because they say that so fast. Uh, After, they have like some things they ask you to. So, for example, things they might ask you if you want your receipt, right? So they in English is the same. Sometimes they ask you if you want your receipt, and they do you want? We say like this, quer você quer a nota? Or remember that I say in Brazil, it's very common to say this inha, this little thing. So, for example, sometimes they even ask, quer a notinha? Você quer a notinha? Is very common to say that in Portuguese as well. Another thing that is very common is, especially in São Paulo, it's a big city, right? So over there, you're gonna see that parking is not easy, So that's why a lot of supermarkets they have parking lot, but to avoid people parking there and do something else, because this is what happened. If it's actually uh, a big supermarket, they will have a lot of spots to park, right? And a lot of people take advantage, park there, and go do another thing. So to avoid this happening, what a lot of supermarkets do, they say, okay, so if you go kind of like in a garage and you get like the ticket, right? And then if you spend like 1 hour there, you need to have a minimum like purchase. For example, in order for them to don't charge you park, they ask, okay, I needed to have at least 10 in Brazilian currency is reais, like 10 reais. So to be 1 hour. If it's 2 hours, 50, or you can be up to 3 hours if you do 100. So that's why at the end, after the cashier like scan everything, they ask you if you need to validate your parking. So this is another very common question. So, and then they ask you, precisa validar o estacionamento? So parking lot is estacionamento, right here. Estacionamento. Então, você precisa validar o estacionamento? So this is a very common question, all right? And then the last one that all the time, all places that you go to, all stores, it's a very common question, debit or credit, you know? Even though like you go, because actually needed to, this happens in Brazil because you need to put a different function in the machine, right? So for example, you say, you're gonna have, they say, okay, I'm gonna pay with my card, and they all the time they ask, débito ou crédito. All right. Right now, we're gonna read a dialogue just to have an idea what is the a conversation like in the supermarket. So you can pay attention. Like I told you, the goal right here is also you understand, you learn some new vocabulary of Portuguese, but also understand what usually they ask and what is your attitude. So, for example, what is your mindset? So, probably they will ask you those questions more or less like this. Of course, they like when I taught my wife, they can surprise and ask something totally different, right? But most of the times they'll ask this, and if you don't understand, make sure you ask them. Say like, sorry, can you say that again? Or I didn't understand. What is this? What is that? So the next time you go, you can understand better. So this is a really good mindset, especially if we're just visiting the country. Probably you're never gonna see the person again. So try to have the conversation. Try to practice that. I'm sure your Portuguese is gonna improve it a lot. All right. So let's go to the next one. So right here. So the letters in green is the cashier, and then in black is gonna be me. All right. So I will read both. I will give like a pause so you can repeat after me, especially with the pronunciation. All right. And then later I will translate again just to make sure you guys understood everything. All right. So, okay. So repeat with me. Boa tarde. Tudo bem? Boa tarde. Cliente mais? Não. Nota fiscal paulista? Não. Sacolinha? Sim. Duas, por favor. Ok. The pull, pull, right? Pull, pull. They are scanning the product. Ok. Deu R$ 78,50. Tá bom. Vou pagar no cartão. Débito ou crédito? Crédito. Ok. Precisa validar o estacionamento? Não, obrigado. All right, very good, guys. So in here, look, boa tarde, good afternoon. How are you? Good afternoon. Cliente mais those loyalty programs? Ah, no, thank you. And then here, look, if you are in São Paulo, so I just put it when I was explaining to you guys before, I just say nota, right? But actually, also we can say nota fiscal, which is an invoice. And then in São Paulo, they will say nota fiscal paulista. Probably in another city, in another state, they're gonna say something else. Okay. Also, they depends on the city. You need to pay the bag or not. So probably depends on the city you are at. Like they're gonna say sacolinha or not. Okay. And then one thing that I want to say that again is usually they'll ask those type of questions, but try to pay attention and try to make the small conversation. So for example, especially after they say the price, you can say okay, and then you can ask a question, like today is very hot, right? Hoje está muito quente. Also another thing that it's very interesting is like this one. Deu 78 reais and 50 cents. Deu. So in English, you're gonna say it is, right? But in Portuguese, we say deu. Esse deu is more or less like the result is, you know? Dar, the word dar in Portuguese means give, but also it can means the result of something is, you know? For example, let me tell you, whenever you say, for example, turn out, how did it turn out? For example, if you say that in English, oh, okay, like I'm gonna go talk to him and then to get a like promotion, for example. And then probably like if a person asks you how was it, or for example, how did it go? In Portuguese, you can ask sometimes like o que deu, like what happened, how did it go, o que deu. For example, o que deu in this place, so this is very interesting. So that it means give, but also it can mean like in other situation the result is. So what was the result? If you can ask like o que deu, what was the result? So that is a very interesting, because this is very hard for us to remember when we are teaching Portuguese. If you are not teaching in this situation, it's very hard to remember that that also means the result. Okay, so this is a very good tip for you, and then you can use that in your vocabulary, or at least pay attention if someone say that it actually means the result. All right, and then at the end, so in that when you're gonna pay, so you can start a small conversation and then do it. Like you're gonna improve a lot of Portuguese only doing that. you know and then they say debit or credit, and then do you need to validate your parking? No, thank you. All right. So, guys, so this was what I want to talk for today. Basically, I told you, besides pay attention in the words in Portuguese, right? Some new vocabulary, especially in this one, that is a very good vocabulary to for you who are maybe in an intermediate or advanced level. This is a very good way to improve, to see that you can use that to other situations. But also, when I want to emphasize, especially for the basic and intermediate levels, try to go to supermarket and try to have those small conversations, not only at the supermarket, but whenever you are in a new place, especially if you're just visiting, do the small conversation. You're gonna be nervous, but more than you do, more often that you do, less nervous you're gonna be, and more Portuguese you speak, and more fluently will be. So then you can speak Portuguese faster than you think. All right. So this is Portuguese with Gustavo, and if you have any comments, make sure you comment right here, and then I will answer you if you have any questions. All right. So muito obrigado e até mais. Tchau, tchau.